The desert air shimmered in waves across the Syrian landscape as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Ghost Martinez settled into her hide position. At 600 hours, the sun was already merciless, but she'd endured far worse during her decade as a Navy SEAL. Her spotter, Petty Officer Marcus Chen, lay beside her, scanning the compound through high-powered optics. "Range to target," Sarah whispered. 1,200 meters. "Wind 3 knots east to northeast," Marcus replied without looking away from his scope. Sarah adjusted her position behind the Barrett M82 sniper rifle, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon like an extension of her own body. Below them, nestled in a valley carved by ancient rivers, sat a fortified compound that intelligence had tracked for 8 months. Inside was Khalid al-Yassin, a weapons trafficker responsible for arming 3 different insurgent groups across the Middle East. His networks had American blood on them, 17 soldiers killed by IEDs built from his materials. Today, that debt would be paid. "Ghost Bulldog, radio check," crackled through her earpiece. "Bulldog Ghost, Lima Charlie. Eyes on target building," Sarah responded, using the military brevity code for loud and clear. Lieutenant Jake Richards, callsign Bulldog, led the assault element of SEAL Team 7 positioned 2 kilometers south. They'd infiltrated under darkness, waiting for Sarah's shot to trigger the raid. It was a choreographed dance of violence they performed dozens of times across 3 continents. But this mission was different. Sarah had spent 6 years fighting for the right to be here. When the Pentagon finally opened SEAL training to women in 2016, she'd been among the first to volunteer. The media circus, the political debates, the endless scrutiny, none of it mattered when she'd rung that bell at the end of Bud's training, one of only 2 women in her class to complete the program. Her class had started with 168 candidates. Only 29 graduated. "Movement, second-floor balcony," Marcus called out softly. Sarah shifted her scope. A figure emerged into the morning light, surrounded by bodyguards. Even from over a kilometer away, she recognized the face from countless intelligence briefings. Khalid al-Yassin, drinking tea like he didn't have a care in the world. "Positive ID on Jackpot," Sarah confirmed, using the mission's code name for the target. "I have the shot." "All elements, this is Bulldog. Stand by," Jake's voice cut through the radio frequency. "Ghost, you are cleared hot, send it." Sarah's world narrowed to the crosshairs and her breathing. She'd made this shot 1,000 times in training, hundreds in combat. The mathematics were simple: bullet drop, windage, Coriolis effect, even the curvature of the Earth at this distance. Her mind calculated automatically while her body remained perfectly still. Breathe in, breathe out. Halfway between breaths the body is calmest, the heart beats slowest. That's when you squeeze. The rifle roared. The massive .50 caliber round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet's impact. Khalid al-Yassin's head snapped back, his teacup exploding in a spray of ceramic and liquid. His bodyguards froze for 1 critical second, trying to process what happened. That second was all Team 7 needed. "Jackpot down. I repeat, Jackpot is down," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Moving in." Jake's team erupted from concealment, explosives breaching the compound's outer walls. Then Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the horizon, a wall of brown was rising, massive, churning, blotting out the sky itself. "Sandstorm," Marcus shouted. "Jesus Christ, look at the size of that thing." The meteorological report had predicted light winds. This was something else entirely, a monster born from the desert's fury, racing toward them at 50 miles per hour. "All elements abort. We have a massive sandstorm inbound." The mission commander's voice crackled with urgency. "Exfil now, this is not a drill." Sarah and Marcus grabbed their gear, sprinting toward the extraction point where 2 MH-60 Black Hawks waited. Below, Jake's team emerged from the compound, carrying hard drives and documents, running for their lives as the storm devoured the landscape behind them. The first helicopter lifted off successfully, banking hard toward the Turkish border. Sarah's bird, Razor 2-1, struggled against winds that seemed determined to slam it back to Earth. "Hold on," the pilot screamed. The sandstorm hit like a physical wall. The world turned brown-black. The helicopter lurched violently, alarms shrieking as the engines ingested sand. Through the chaos, Sarah saw the pilots fighting the controls, saw the instrument panels flashing red. Metal screamed. Something critical snapped in the rotor assembly. They were falling. The Black Hawk slammed into the ravine at 60 miles per hour, tumbling end over end. Bodies flew through the shattered cabin. Sarah felt herself launch into space, the world spinning sickeningly. She hit something hard, water, rocks, impossible to tell, and then the floodwaters grabbed her, pulling her down into churning darkness. Her last conscious thought was of her father's voice from Bud's graduation. "Martinez, you're one hell of a SEAL." Then nothing but black water and silence. Above the ravine, Jake Richards screamed her name into the howling storm, finding only her tactical vest wrapped around jagged rocks and her beloved rifle wedged into a crevice. The current had taken everything else. "Ghost Sarah," his voice broke, but the storm swallowed his cries, leaving only the wind's mournful answer. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez was gone. The fluorescent lights of the Joint Operations Center at Naval Special Warfare Command hummed with sterile indifference as Commander Robert Hayes studied the satellite imagery. 72 hours had passed since Razor 2-1 went down. 72 hours of searching through impossible terrain during the worst sandstorm the region had seen in 15 years. "Sir, search and rescue has completed their final grid sweep," the intelligence officer reported, her voice carefully neutral. "No additional survivors located. No emergency beacon signals detected." Commander Hayes closed his eyes. 3 confirmed KIA pulled from the wreckage, 2 critically wounded, already medevaced to Landstuhl, and 1 missing, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez. "Status of the missing SEAL?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No body recovered. Her tactical vest and primary weapon were found approximately 40 meters downstream from the crash site. Forensic analysis shows." The officer hesitated. "Blood evidence consistent with significant trauma. The floodwaters were moving at an estimated 15 knots during the storm. Sir, the probability of survival is—" "I know the probability, Lieutenant," Hayes cut her off sharply. He'd lost people before. It never got easier, especially not this one. Across the compound, Lieutenant Jake Richards sat alone in the team room, still wearing his desert fatigues despite being back stateside for 18 hours. His hands shook as he held Sarah's dog tags, the ones recovered from her vest. Protocol said they'd go to her next of kin after the paperwork was filed. Jake, his commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander David Torres, stood in the doorway. "We need to talk." "She's not dead," Jake said flatly, not looking up. "Jake, I would know. We've done 73 missions together. 73. I would feel it if she was gone." Torres stepped inside, closing the door. "Brother, I know what she meant to this team, what she means to you, but the search teams covered every square kilometer for 20 miles downstream. The medical examiner says with those injuries, the water temperature, the distance—" "Stop," Jake's voice cracked. "Don't finish that sentence." Torres sat down across from him. "Command is making it official at 1600 hours. They're declaring her KIA. You need to prepare yourself." Jake's fist slammed into the table, sending Sarah's tags clattering. "She's the toughest person I've ever met. She survived Hell Week with a stress fracture in her femur that she didn't report until after graduation. She dragged Marcus Chen 300 meters under enemy fire in Kandahar with a collapsed lung. Ghost doesn't quit. She doesn't die in some random helicopter crash." Sometimes warriors don't get to choose how they fall, Torres said quietly. You know that. At 1600 hours, the official notification went out across Naval Special Warfare channels. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, Navy SEAL, was declared killed in action. 3,000 miles away, in a modest home in San Diego, Maria Martinez was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, she saw two Navy officers in their service dress blues standing on her porch. Her heart stopped. No, not Sarah. Please God, not Sarah. Her husband, retired Marine Gunnery Sergeant Eduardo Martinez, appeared beside her. His face had gone completely white. 26 years of military service meant he knew exactly what those uniforms on his doorstep meant. I'll get it, he said, his voice hollow. Maria grabbed his arm. Eddie, I can't do this. We don't have a choice, Amber. He kissed her forehead and walked to the door with the bearing of a man heading to his own execution. The chaplain's words blurred together. Regret to inform you, in service to her country, helicopter accident, no remains recovered at this time. Their younger daughter, Jessica, a sophomore at UC Berkeley, screamed when she got the call. Her roommate found her collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, still clutching her phone. Sarah had called her just before the mission, like she always did. Their last conversation had been about Jessica's chemistry midterm, something so normal, so mundane. Now Sarah was gone. But Sarah Martinez was not gone. 53 miles from the crash site, in a cave system carved by ancient water, her eyes opened to absolute darkness. The pain hit immediately, a symphony of agony that made her gasp. Her left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Broken. Definitely broken. Ribs too, based on the stabbing sensation with each breath. Her head throbbed with the unmistakable pressure of a concussion. She tried to move and screamed, the sound echoing off unseen stone walls. Breathe, assess, adapt, overcome. The mantra from Bud.S. instructor Draper screamed at her during surf torture when the hypothermia made her want to quit. She'd survived that. She could survive this. Sarah forced herself to catalog her situation methodically, the way SEER School had taught her. She ran her right hand, the one that still worked, over her body. Her tactical vest was gone. So was her rifle, her radio, her medical kit. But her sidearm was still holstered on her thigh. She felt the familiar weight of her Sig Sauer P226, 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Her knife was still strapped to her calf. Her boots were intact. She had a fire starter in her pocket. She always kept one there, a habit from her survival instructor days. She was alive, broken, bleeding, alone in hostile territory with no way to contact friendly forces, but alive. Sarah Martinez pulled herself into a sitting position, biting through the pain until she tasted blood. In the darkness, she whispered the words that had sustained her through every impossible moment of her career. The only easy day was yesterday. Somewhere above, her teammates were probably giving up the search. Somewhere far away, her family was receiving the worst news of their lives. But Sarah wasn't dead. And she had no intention of staying missing. She just had to survive long enough to prove it. The sound of voices outside the cave speaking Arabic made her freeze. Insurgent patrols, searching for survivors, searching for her. Sarah pulled her pistol with her working hand and waited in the darkness, controlling her breathing despite the broken ribs. If they came into this cave, some of them wouldn't leave. But she needed to save her ammunition, needed to stay hidden, needed to think like a ghost. The voices faded after 10 agonizing minutes. When silence returned, Sarah began the painful process of fashioning a splint for her arm using debris and strips torn from her undershirt. Every movement brought fresh waves of agony, but she worked methodically, the way she'd practiced 100 times in training. Training, it always came back to training. Her instructors had prepared her for this. SEER School, Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. She was in the evasion phase now. 80 miles to the Turkish border. Broken arm, possible internal injuries, no food, no water, no support. Sarah Martinez smiled grimly in the darkness. She'd faced worse odds during Hell Week. Time to prove why they called her Ghost. Day 4 behind enemy lines, and Sarah Martinez was learning that survival wasn't about the big heroic moments. It was about the small, agonizing choices made every single hour. Move now or wait for darker cover. Drink from this contaminated stream or risk another day of dehydration. Use precious energy to find food or conserve strength for distance. Each decision could mean the difference between life and death. She moved only during the darkest hours, between 200 and 500, when even the most dedicated insurgent patrols sought shelter and warmth. Her arm, splinted with branches and paracord salvaged from her boot laces, throbbed with every heartbeat. The swelling had gone down slightly, but infection was her new enemy. She could feel it creeping through her system, the telltale heat radiating from the wound site. Navigation was primitive. No GPS, no compass that had been in her vest. Instead, Sarah relied on celestial navigation learned during land warfare training. Polaris, the North Star, became her constant companion. By keeping it to her right, she maintained a western heading toward the Turkish border. 80 miles, might as well be 800. On the 4th night, Sarah discovered the destroyed village. It materialized from the darkness like a graveyard of civilization, shattered concrete homes, scorched walls still bearing the black stains of fire, craters where artillery had torn the earth. The Syrian civil war had passed through here like a biblical plague, leaving only ruins and ghosts. Sarah approached cautiously, her pistol drawn despite the obvious abandonment. In warfare, obvious was usually a trap. But this place was genuinely dead. She searched methodically, her SEAL training overriding the fatigue and pain. Most structures were too damaged, picked clean by scavengers or previous refugees. Then, in what had once been a small shop, she found treasures. 2 plastic water containers miraculously intact, a length of canvas fabric, a rusted but functional cooking pot. Most importantly, she found a child's backpack, faded and torn but still usable. Sarah filled the containers from a well, dropping in purification tablets from her emergency kit, one of the few items still in her cargo pocket. The water would be questionable, but it was better than the alternative. She loaded her meager supplies into the backpack, wincing as the weight settled against her injured ribs. That's when she heard the trucks. The diesel engines growled through the night, accompanied by voices shouting in Arabic. Sarah dove behind a collapsed wall, her heart hammering. Through a gap in the rubble, she watched headlights sweep across the village square. 3 Toyota pickups, mounted machine guns visible in their beds. Insurgent militia, probably local warlords' men. They stopped in the center of the village, and her blood ran cold as she saw what they'd brought. 4 prisoners, hands bound, forced to kneel in the dirt. "These men betrayed our cause," the commander shouted in Arabic. Sarah's language training was basic, but she understood enough. They spoke to the Americans, gave information to the Crusaders. Collaborators, real or imagined, it didn't matter. The outcome was predetermined. Sarah's hand tightened on her pistol, 16 rounds against 12 armed fighters. The math was simple. Intervening meant dying, and dying meant never making it home. But watching meant living with this moment forever. The commander raised his AK-47. Sarah closed her eyes, forcing herself to remain hidden. The gunshots echoed across the ruins, 4 sharp cracks that seemed to tear the night apart. When she opened her eyes, the bodies lay motionless in the dirt. "Search the area," the commander ordered. "Americans may still be hiding nearby. There is a bounty for the woman SEAL, 10,000 American dollars. Sarah's breath caught. They knew. They were hunting specifically for her. The fighters spread out, methodically checking buildings. Flashlight beams sliced through darkness, moving closer to her position. Sarah calculated distances, angles of fire, escape routes. Her training ran automatically, a survival algorithm processing data faster than conscious thought. 30 meters, 25-20. A fighter approached her hiding spot, his AK-47 held casually, clearly not expecting contact. He was young, maybe 19, with a wispy beard and nervous energy. Sarah could kill him silently, knife to the throat, ease him down, take his weapon and ammunition. But one shot, one sound, and the entire patrol would converge. The fighter stopped 3 meters away, so close Sarah could smell his cigarette smoke. He urinated against the wall, humming tunelessly, completely unaware that a highly trained American sniper was holding her breath in the shadows mere feet away. Seer School had taught her this. Sometimes the hardest part of evasion isn't moving, it's staying absolutely still while every instinct screams to run. After an eternity, the fighter finished and walked away, rejoining his squad. "Nothing here," he called out. "This village is dead." The truck started up, headlights sweeping one final time before rumbling back into the night. Sarah remained frozen for another 20 minutes, ensuring they were truly gone. When she finally moved, her legs nearly collapsed beneath her. The adrenaline crash hit hard, leaving her shaking and nauseous. She vomited behind the wall dry heaves as her stomach was empty, then forced herself to breathe steadily. 4 men executed. How many more would die in this endless war? Sarah gathered her supplies and prepared to move. She had perhaps 2 hours of darkness left. Every minute counted. As she left the village, she passed the execution site. The bodies remained where they'd fallen, already being investigated by wild dogs emerging from the ruins. Sarah whispered a prayer, not for herself but for them, unknown names in an uncounted war. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry." Then she turned west and walked into the darkness. By dawn, she'd covered another 8 miles, moving through an olive grove that provided some concealment. She found a dried irrigation ditch and collapsed into it, pulling the canvas over herself for camouflage. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by fever dreams and the phantom sound of gunshots. When she woke in the afternoon heat, her vision was blurring. The infection was winning. Her arm had swollen to nearly twice its normal size, the skin tight and angry red. She touched her forehead, burning hot. Fever, dehydration, infection, the trinity of death in hostile environments. Sarah forced herself to drink water, rationing carefully. She had perhaps 2 days of supply if she was disciplined. 2 days to cover 70 miles to the border. Impossible, the math didn't work. But Sarah had built a career on making impossible work. As darkness fell on her 5th night alone, she began moving again. West, always west, toward safety, toward home. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, from the day she'd told him she was trying out for the SEALs. "Martinez women don't quit. We might bend, we might break, but we don't quit." "Not quitting, Dad," Sarah whispered to the stars. "Not today." She walked until her legs gave out, then crawled. When crawling became impossible, she rested for 10 minutes and started again. 23 miles from the border, in a landscape of scrub, brush, and rocky hills, Sarah's body finally surrendered. She collapsed near a small farmhouse, barely conscious, her fever raging. As darkness swallowed her vision, she saw a figure approaching, a woman's silhouette against the stars. Friend or enemy? Sarah tried to reach for her pistol, but her hand wouldn't obey. The woman knelt beside her, speaking in rapid Kurdish. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but she heard the tone. Concern, not hostility. "American?" the woman asked in heavily accented English. Sarah managed a small nod. "Come quickly, before they see." Strong hands lifted her, half carrying, half dragging her toward the farmhouse. Sarah's consciousness flickered like a dying candle. Her last thought before the darkness took her completely was simple. Maybe, just maybe, she'd found an ally in hell. Sarah woke to the smell of herbs and the sound of whispered prayers. Her eyes opened to dim lamplight in a small, underground space, a cellar, she realized, with stone walls and a low ceiling. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest as she tried to sit up. No, no, rest. A woman's face appeared above her, weathered and kind, framed by a dark headscarf. You very sick, fever 3 days now. 3 days, Sarah's mind struggled to process. The last thing she remembered was collapsing near the farmhouse. Everything after was fragments, cool water on her lips, gentle hands changing bandages, whispered voices arguing above her. Where? Sarah's throat was sandpaper. Where am I? My home, underground, safe. The woman helped her sip water from a clay cup. I am Amara. You are Sarah, yes. You say name many times in fever. Sarah's training kicked in automatically, even through the fog of illness. Never confirm details. Trust no one. But as she looked at Amara's face, saw the genuine concern there, saw the clean bandages on her arm and the broth warming on a small camp stove, she understood something crucial. This woman had saved her life. How did you know I was American? Sarah asked carefully. Amara smiled sadly. Your uniform, even torn, I recognize. My husband. She paused, pain crossing her features. He fight with Kurdish forces, work with American soldiers against Daesh, ISIS. They killed him 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Sarah said and meant it. War takes many husbands, many sons. Amara began checking Sarah's bandages with practiced efficiency. Your arm was very bad. Infection. I give you antibiotics. My son had ear infection last month. I saved some pills. Also herbs. Turmeric, honey, garlic. Old ways, but they work. Sarah looked down at her arm. The swelling had decreased dramatically. The angry red had faded to pink. The splint had been replaced with a more professional version, complete with padding. You're a doctor. Nurse before war. Amara's hands moved with confidence. Now I am farmer, and widow, and mother to Dylan. She gestured to the cellar stairs where a young boy peered down, his dark eyes wide with fear and curiosity. The boy couldn't have been more than 12, thin and serious beyond his years. He spoke rapidly in Kurdish to his mother, his tone clearly anxious. He says I am crazy, Amara translated. Says the militia offers $10,000 for American woman. Says they will kill us all if they find you here. He's right, Sarah said quietly. You should turn me in, take the money, keep your son safe. Amara's laugh was sharp and bitter. And what do I tell my husband's spirit? That I sold an American soldier for money, that I forgot how your people fought beside him, died beside him. She shook her head firmly. No, that is not who I am, not who we are. Dylan descended the stairs slowly, still suspicious. He spoke again, pointing at Sarah. He asks if you really are a SEAL. The fighters say woman cannot be warrior. He thinks maybe you are spy or journalist. Sarah met the boy's eyes. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the impossible situation, she smiled. From her cargo pocket, she pulled out her challenge coin, the trident insignia of naval special warfare gleaming in the lamplight. Tell him I earned this. Tell him it's harder to get than any medal. Tell him only warriors carry it. Amara translated. Dylan stepped closer, examining the coin with reverence. He asked another question, softer this time. He wants to know, did you kill the bad men, the ones who hurt people? Sarah thought of Khalid al-Yassin, of the shot that had started this entire nightmare. She thought of the countless missions, the battles, the faces of enemies who would never hurt innocent people again. Yes, she said simply, that was my job, to stop bad men from hurting good people. Dylan considered this, then nodded slowly. He spoke to his mother in Kurdish, his tone changed, less fearful, more resolved. He says if you fight bad men, then we help you, Amara translated, her eyes glistening. He says his father would want us to help. Over the following days, an unlikely routine developed in the hidden cellar. Amara tended Sarah's wounds with a combination of modern medicine and ancient remedies. Sarah's fever broke on the second day, her strength slowly returning. Dylan brought news from the village. Militia patrols had intensified, roadblocks appeared on every major route, and the bounty had increased to $15,000. They know you are alive, Amara said grimly. Someone saw you in the destroyed village. They search everywhere. Sarah knew she was putting this family in mortal danger with each day she stayed. But she was still too weak to travel, still too recognizable as a Western woman in a region where that meant instant capture or death. In the quiet hours, when Dylan was asleep upstairs and Amara worked on mending clothes by lamplight, the two women talked. Language barriers fell away as they shared stories. Amara spoke of her husband, Rashid, a gentle man who taught literature before the war forced him to become a soldier. Sarah spoke of her family, of her father's pride when she graduated Bud S., of her sister Jessica's dreams of becoming a doctor. You have people waiting for you, Amara said. People who think you are dead, yes. Yes, Sarah admitted, the weight of it crushing. My team, my family, they've probably already had my memorial service. Then you must get home. You must show them God is not finished with you yet. On the seventh day in the cellar, Sarah managed to stand without assistance, to walk the length of the small space without collapsing. Her arm was healing, though it would be weeks before she regained full strength. The ribs still ached but no longer stabbed with every breath. She was performing basic exercises, push-ups, squats, testing her body's limits, when Dylan rushed down the stairs, his face pale with terror. Mama, soldiers, many soldiers. Through the cellar's small ventilation grate, Sarah heard the rumble of diesel engines, the shouts of men, the distinctive sound of weapon safeties clicking off. Amara's face went white. They are here. Someone betrayed us. Sarah grabbed her pistol, checking the magazine. 15 rounds. Against how many fighters? Get Dylan and go, Sarah ordered. Out the back, there's still time. No, Amara's voice was steel. This is my home. You are my guest. We do not abandon guests to wolves. Above them, heavy boots stomped on the wooden floors. A voice shouted in Arabic, commanding, familiar. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized it from the execution in the village. Hassan Qasim, the militia commander, he was here in this house hunting for her. Dylan pressed against his mother, trembling. Amara held him close, her eyes meeting Sarah's across the dim cellar. In that moment, Sarah saw everything this woman had risked. Her home, her life, her son's future, all for a stranger, all because of a principle, a code of honor that transcended nationality and religion and war. I won't let them hurt you, Sarah whispered. I promise. Above, furniture crashed. Hassan's voice grew louder, angrier. Search everything. The American whore is here. I can feel it. Sarah positioned herself at the bottom of the cellar stairs, pistol raised, body shielding Amara and Dylan. If they found this cellar, some of Hassan's men would die before they reached the family. But eventually, the math would catch up. 15 rounds wouldn't be enough. The footsteps moved directly overhead. Someone was standing right above the concealed cellar door. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. This was it. Then a commotion outside, shouting, gunfire in the distance. Hassan cursed loudly. What now? Go see what that is. The boots thundered away. Engines started. Within minutes, the house was silent again. Sarah didn't lower her weapon for another 30 minutes, listening, waiting, ensuring it wasn't a trick. Finally, Amara touched her shoulder gently. They are gone, but they will return. They always return. Sarah holstered her pistol and met Amara's eyes. Then we need to leave. Tonight, all of us. Where? Amara asked. Where can we go? Sarah thought of the Turkish border, still miles away. She thought of her training, of escape and evasion protocols. She thought of everything she'd learned about survival. "I'm getting you and Dylan out of this hell," Sarah said. "You saved my life. Now I'm going to save yours." Amara smiled through her tears. "Then we go together as friends." "As friends," Sarah agreed. They began to plan their escape, three souls bound by circumstance, preparing to challenge the darkness together. Hassan Qasim stood in the ruins of a checkpoint his men had abandoned, his rage barely contained. The informant had been so certain, an American woman hiding at the widow's farm. Yet when his forces arrived, they'd found nothing. Another false lead, another wasted opportunity. But Hassan hadn't survived 5 years of civil war by giving up easily. "Increase patrols to every 4 hours, he commanded his lieutenant. "No vehicle moves without inspection. No one travels after dark. And double the bounty, $20,000 American dollars for the woman SEAL. I want her alive if possible, but dead is acceptable." His lieutenant hesitated. "Commander, 20,000. That's more than we paid for the last weapons shipment." "The Americans will pay 10 times that to get her back," Hassan smiled coldly. "And if they won't, there are others who will pay for the propaganda value. A female SEAL captured or killed by our forces. The media attention alone is worth millions." He pulled out his satellite phone, making calls to allied militia groups, spreading the word. The net was tightening. Somewhere out there, the American ghost was running, and Hassan loved the hunt. 7,000 miles away, in a dimly lit office at Joint Special Operations Command Headquarters in North Carolina, Lieutenant Jake Richards sat hunched over a computer screen, his eyes bloodshot from 72 consecutive hours of analysis. "Jake, you need to sleep," Lieutenant Commander Torres said from the doorway. "That's an order." In a minute, Jake didn't look up. He was reviewing drone footage for the 100th time, frame by frame, analyzing thermal signatures from the crash site and surrounding area. Everyone else had moved on. Sarah's memorial service was scheduled for next week. Her personal effects were being prepared for shipment to her family. The official report listed her as KIA, body unrecovered, presumed dead due to catastrophic injuries and environmental factors. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling. That instinct every operator learned to trust, the one that kept you alive when logic said you should be dead. There he breathed, freezing the frame. "Right there." Torres stepped closer. "What am I looking at?" "This is from day 6 post-crash. See this thermal signature?" Jake zoomed in on a small heat bloom moving through a wadi, approximately 43 miles from the crash site. "Watch the movement pattern." He played the sequence. The signature moved, stopped, moved again, but not randomly. It used terrain features for cover, traveled during the coolest hours, avoided open areas. "Could be anyone," Torres said. "A refugee, a local." "Moving in tactical bounds," Jake interrupted. "Maintaining noise and light discipline, using optimal concealment routes." He pulled up another sequence. "Here, day 8, same signature 12 miles further west, still moving toward the Turkish border, still exhibiting advanced fieldcraft." Torres leaned in, his skepticism wavering. "You think it's her?" "I know it is." Jake's voice cracked with emotion. "Ghost doesn't move like a refugee. She moves like a SEAL because she is a SEAL." "Even if you're right, and that's a massive if, she's in hostile territory, possibly injured with no support. We can't authorize a rescue mission based on one ambiguous thermal signature." "Then I'll go unauthorized." Jake stood, his jaw set. "I'll resign my commission right now and go get her myself." "Sit down, Lieutenant." Torres' command voice cut through the room. Jake sat, fists clenched. Torres studied the footage again, then made a decision. "I'll take this to the Admiral. No promises. But if, and this is a big if, we can get CIA confirmation of an American presence in that sector, maybe we can justify a reconnaissance mission." Hope flared in Jake's chest. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. Even if we go, the odds of finding one person in 100 square miles of hostile territory are astronomical. Tors headed for the door, then paused. But you're right about one thing. If anyone could survive this, it's Ghost. In the cellar, Sarah was teaching Dylan basic survival skills: how to purify water, how to identify edible plants, how to move silently. The boy absorbed everything with intense focus, asking questions in his broken English. "Why you become soldier?" he asked during a break. Sarah considered the question. "Because I wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. I wanted to make a difference." "You kill many bad men." "Some," Sarah admitted. "But being a soldier isn't about killing. It's about being willing to sacrifice yourself so others can live free." Dylan thought about this. "My father say same thing before he die." Amara descended the stairs with troubling news. "The patrols are constant now. Every 4 hours they pass through the village. They are checking every home, every farm. Yesterday they found the Kahlo family hiding refugees. She couldn't finish. Sarah understood. "We need to move tonight." "The border is still 40 miles away," Amara protested. "With Dylan, we cannot travel fast, and they watch all the roads." "Then we don't use roads." Sarah spread out a hand-drawn map she'd created from Amara's descriptions of the area. "We go through the mountains. Harder terrain but fewer patrols. There's a shepherd's route here that crosses the border near an old Roman ruin, still used by smugglers sometimes." "In winter," Amara looked doubtful. "It will be very cold, very dangerous." "More dangerous than staying here." Sarah met her eyes. "Amara, they know I'm in this area. They're tightening the noose. Every hour we wait, the risk increases, not just for me, but for you and Dylan." A sound from above froze them all. Vehicles approaching. Dylan raced to the small window. "Mama, many trucks coming here." Through the ventilation grate, Sarah heard the diesel engines growing louder, multiple vehicles this time. More than before. Her hand moved to her pistol. Amara grabbed her arm. "There is another way, a tunnel. My husband built it during the worst of the ISIS occupation, for emergencies." "Show me," Sarah commanded. Amara moved a shelf, revealing a narrow passage barely 3 feet high. "It goes under the field to the irrigation canal, maybe 200 meters. Pack everything. Now we're leaving." Sarah helped them gather supplies: food, water, blankets, the precious antibiotics. Everything went into packs. Above, boots hit the ground. Hassan's voice rang out unmistakable. "Surround the house. No one leaves. Search everything, including the cellar this time." "Go," Sarah pushed Dylan toward the tunnel. "Amara, go with him." "What about you?" Sarah grabbed a lantern and her pistol. "I'll buy you time. Give me 3 minutes, then start moving. Don't stop for anything. There's a meeting point marked on the map, an abandoned well 5 miles northwest. Wait for me there." "Sarah." 3 minutes, go." Amara pulled Dylan into the tunnel. Sarah watched them disappear, then turned to face the cellar stairs. She could hear them above, tearing through the house, getting closer. Sarah positioned herself behind a support beam, pistol ready. She'd give Amara and Dylan their 3 minutes. Every second counted. The cellar door crashed open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. "Clear," a voice shouted in Arabic. They started down the stairs. Sarah waited, counting seconds, controlling her breathing. She needed them to believe the cellar was empty, needed them to waste time searching while Amara and Dylan got distance. 2 minutes. A fighter reached the bottom of the stairs, sweeping his light across the space. He was young, nervous, his AK-47 held too loosely. Sarah remained perfectly still behind the beam, a shadow among shadows. The fighter moved deeper into the cellar, calling to his companions. "Nothing here, just old storage." 2 minutes 30 seconds. More boots on the stairs. 3 fighters now, spreading out, checking corners. One moved toward the shelf that concealed the tunnel entrance. Sarah's finger moved to the trigger. If he discovered it, she'd have to engage. 3 targets, 15 rounds. She could do it, but the gunfire would bring everyone. The fighter reached for the shelf. 3 minutes. Sarah made her decision. She fired a single shot into the cellar ceiling. The crack was deafening in the enclosed space. The fighters spun toward the sound, confused, searching for the source. Sarah was already moving, scrambling into the tunnel entrance before they could process what happened. She pulled the shelf closed behind her and crawled frantically through the narrow passage, dirt raining down from the low ceiling. Behind her, shouts of alarm. They'd found the tunnel. Sarah crawled faster, ignoring the pain in her ribs, her healing arms screaming in protest. The tunnel seemed endless. 200 meters felt like 2 miles in the claustrophobic darkness. Gunfire erupted behind her. Bullets tore through the tunnel, ricocheting off rock. She felt one pass so close it burned her leg. Then daylight, the tunnel exit half hidden by brush. Sarah burst out into the irrigation canal, immediately scanning for threats. Clear. She ran, using the canal for cover, putting distance between herself and the farm. A half-mile away, she saw them, Amara and Dylan, pressed against the canal wall, waiting. "Run," Sarah gasped. "They're right behind me." The 3 of them fled into the gathering dusk, leaving behind the only home Amara and Dylan had ever known, racing toward an uncertain future in the mountains. Behind them, Hassan Qasim stood in the tunnel exit, his face twisted with rage as he watched 3 figures disappear into the twilight. "Find them," he screamed. "I want them found. Double all patrols. They cannot have gone far." The hunt had truly begun. The mountains rose before them like ancient sentinels, their peaks lost in gathering clouds that promised another storm. Sarah checked her salvaged compass for the 15th time in an hour, confirming their heading. Northwest. Always northwest, toward the Turkish border that lay somewhere beyond those dark ridges. "How much further?" Dylan asked, his young voice thin with exhaustion. They'd been moving for 16 hours straight, stopping only for brief water breaks. 10 miles to the Shepherd's Pass, Sarah answered, though her body screamed that 10 miles might as well be 100. Her healing arm throbbed, the makeshift pack cutting into her injured ribs with every step. "We rest for 20 minutes. Eat something." Amara collapsed against a rock outcropping, her face drawn and pale. She wasn't built for this kind of forced march. Neither was her son, but Hassan's patrols had given them no choice: keep moving or die. Sarah distributed their meager rations, dried dates, flat bread, water. She took the smallest portion despite needing the most. Food was running critically low. "Mama, look." Dylan pointed to the valley below where headlights cut through the dusk. Lots of headlights. A convoy of vehicles spreading out in a search pattern. "They're organizing a proper sweep," Sarah observed, her tactical mind analyzing the deployment. 3-pronged approach. They're trying to box us in against the mountains. "Can we outrun them?" Amara asked. Sarah studied the terrain, running calculations. The militia had vehicles, numbers, local knowledge. Her team had desperation and one former Navy SEAL who could barely use her left arm. "Not outrun, outsmart." She traced a route on her crude map. "They'll expect us to take the established paths, so we go where vehicles can't follow, straight up the rock face here, then traverse the ridgeline. It's harder, more dangerous, but—" Thunder rumbled overhead, cutting her off. Sarah looked up at the churning sky with a grim smile. "Another storm," Amara whispered, fear evident in her voice. "Good," Sarah said. "Storms are loud, they mask movement, they make thermal imaging useless, they keep patrols seeking shelter instead of hunting." She stood, shouldering her pack. "The last storm nearly killed me. Maybe this one will save us." At the CIA station in Ankara, Turkey, Operations Officer Marcus Webb stared at the encrypted message from JSOC with growing interest. a possible American survivor in northern Syria. SEAL Team 7, requesting reconnaissance support. He picked up the secure phone. "This is Webb. I need everything we have on militia activity in grid sector Echo 7 for the last 72 hours. Yes, I'll wait." His local asset, a Kurdish intelligence officer named Kodar, had reported unusual militia movements, large-scale search operations, a bounty that had climbed to $20,000 for an American woman. The pieces were connecting. Webb typed a rapid response. "Human confirms heightened search activity. Multiple sources report American female possibly traveling with local civilians. Hassan Qasim's militia conducting aggressive sweep operations. Request immediate extraction authorization." The response came back within minutes. "Extraction approved. Assets deploying." In North Carolina, Jake Richards assembled his team. "Gentlemen, we have a possible miracle. Ghost may be alive and we're going to bring her home." The first drops of rain fell as Sarah led them up the rocky slope. Not a gentle rain, this was the desert's fury unleashed, cold and violent. Within minutes they were soaked, the rocks turning slippery and treacherous. "Hold onto the rope," Sarah shouted over the wind. She'd fashioned a safety line from paracord, tying them together. If one fell, the others could anchor. It was basic mountaineering, but better than nothing. Dylan slipped, his small cry of terror barely audible over the storm. Amara grabbed him, hauling him back to safety. Sarah's heart hammered. One mistake at these heights meant death. They climbed for 2 hours, every meter gained through sheer willpower. Sarah's injured arm weakened, struggling to maintain grip. Twice she nearly fell, catching herself at the last second. Finally, they crested the ridge. Below, headlights still searched the valleys, but up here, in the teeth of the storm, they were invisible. "Cave," Dylan pointed to a dark opening in the rock face. They stumbled inside, collapsing in the shelter. The cave was shallow but dry, protected from the wind. Sarah immediately checked for animal signs or other occupants. Clear. "We stay here tonight," she decided. "Move at first light." Amara was shivering violently, hypothermia setting in. Sarah pulled out their only blanket, wrapping it around the mother and son. "Body heat. Stay close together." "What about you?" Amara protested. "I'm trained for this. You're not. Keep Dylan warm." Sarah positioned herself at the cave entrance, watching the storm, her pistol ready. The temperature was dropping rapidly. By morning, there would be ice. Her thoughts drifted to her team. Jake would never stop looking. She knew him too well. He'd be tearing through intelligence reports, drone footage, anything to find a trace. If anyone could pull off a miracle rescue, it was Bulldog. But even miracles needed help. Sarah checked her remaining ammunition. 11 rounds left. She'd used 4 buying time at the farmhouse. 11 rounds to get 3 people across the border. The math was bad, but she'd worked with worse. At 300 hours, Sarah heard them. Voices carried on the wind, searchers, closer than they should be. Hassan's men, working through the night despite the storm. Dedicated, motivated by 20,000 reasons to keep looking. She woke Amara silently, hand over her mouth to prevent any sound, pointed to the cave entrance. Amara understood immediately, gathering Dylan. They had minutes, maybe less. Sarah led them deeper into the cave system, discovering passages she'd missed in the initial check. The network went back further, twisting through the mountain. She moved by touch in absolute darkness, one hand on the wall, the other gripping Amara's hand behind her. "Stop," she whispered. Voices echoed from the entrance. Searchers had found their cave. Flashlight beams probed the darkness. Sarah pulled Amara and Dylan into a narrow side passage, pressing them against the cold stone. "Check everything," a voice commanded in Arabic. "They were here, the ground is still warm." Boots scraped on stone, coming closer. Sarah's hand moved to her pistol. In the confined space, every shot would be deafening, but if they were discovered, she'd have no choice. The flashlight beam swept past their hiding spot, missing them by inches. Dylan trembled against his mother. Amara held him tight, her hand over his mouth, tears streaming down her face. The searcher stood directly outside their hiding spot, his breathing audible. Sarah could smell his cigarette smoke. "Anything?" another voice called. "Just a cave, they're not here." "Hassan wants the entire mountain searched. Keep looking." The footsteps retreated, voices faded. After 30 agonizing minutes, silence returned. Sarah waited another hour before moving, ensuring it wasn't a trap. When they finally emerged, the storm had intensified to near whiteout conditions. Visibility was 10 meters at best. "We move now," Sarah decided. "The storm is our cover. They won't expect us to travel in this." "It's suicide," Amara protested. "We can't see anything." "Exactly, neither can they." Sarah checked her compass. "Trust me, I've navigated worse." That was a lie. She'd never navigated worse. But Amara didn't need to know that. They pushed into the screaming wind, Sarah leading by compass, bearing, and instinct. The border was close now, maybe 6 miles. So close she could almost taste freedom. But those 6 miles contained Hassan's entire militia force, and dawn was only 3 hours away. The storm raged around them as they descended the mountain's far slope, 3 souls fighting for survival against impossible odds. Behind them, Hassan Qasim received the report that tracks had been found leading higher into the mountains. He smiled coldly, studying his map. "They're trapped," he told his lieutenant. "The storm will pass by morning. We'll have helicopters in the air and fresh troops on every route. The American Ghost has nowhere left to run." He called in reinforcements from allied militias. By dawn, 200 fighters would be scouring these mountains. But Hassan Qasim didn't know that 60 miles away, 4 MH-60 Black Hawks were lifting off from a covert Turkish airbase, carrying SEAL Team 7 into the storm. Jake Richards checked his weapon for the 5th time, his jaw set with determination. "We're coming, Ghost," he whispered to the night. "Hold on, we're coming." The storm screamed its answer, masking the sound of American helicopters racing toward the border, toward an impossible rescue, toward 3 people who refused to quit even when the whole world said they should. In the mountains, Sarah felt something shift in the wind, a change, a presence. She looked up at the black sky and smiled. "Soon," she whispered, "very soon." Then she turned back to her compass and kept walking, leading her unlikely family toward freedom, one painful step at a time. The storm raged on, but Sarah Martinez had learned something important. Sometimes you don't run from the storm. Sometimes you rise through it. Dawn broke over the mountains with deceptive beauty, golden light cutting through dissipating storm clouds, painting the rocks in shades of amber and rose. Sarah had learned not to trust beautiful mornings. They often preceded the ugliest days. They'd covered another 4 miles during the night, putting the worst of the terrain behind them. The Turkish border lay just 2 miles ahead, marked by a dry riverbed that local smugglers used as a crossing point. So close, but those final 2 miles stretched before them like an impossible chasm. "Mama, I can't," Dylan whimpered, his legs buckling. The 12-year-old had been running on pure adrenaline. Now that fuel was exhausted. Sarah knelt beside him. "Hey, look at me." She waited until his terrified eyes met hers. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. You know that. Braver than most soldiers I've served with. Just 2 more miles. 2 miles and you're safe. Can you give me 2 more miles?" Dylan nodded weakly. Sarah lifted him onto her back despite the screaming protest from her injured arm. He weighed maybe 70 pounds, but it felt like twice that. "Sarah, your arm," Amara started. "We'll heal, let's move." They descended into a rocky canyon, using the high walls for cover. Sarah's every sense was on high alert. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, That sixth sense operators developed, the one that kept you alive. Something was wrong. She heard it half a second before she saw it, the distinctive whine of a drone overhead. Down now, Sarah dove behind a boulder, pulling Amara and Dylan with her. The surveillance drone circled overhead, its camera gimbal rotating. Hassan had brought in the serious hardware. "Did it see us?" Amara whispered. "Maybe, we have to assume yes." Sarah's mind raced through options. The canyon offered cover from aerial observation but would funnel them into natural choke points, perfect kill zones. Her radio crackled with static weight. She didn't have a radio. Her equipment was long gone. The sound came again, not static, voices, carried on the wind from ahead. Sarah crept forward to a vantage point and her heart sank. Below, blocking the canyon exit, Hassan had positioned 2 technical vehicles, pickup trucks with mounted heavy machine guns. At least 15 fighters visible, possibly more hidden. They'd been herded. The drone, the patrols, all designed to push them exactly here. "We're trapped," Amara breathed, seeing it too. Sarah assessed their position. Sheer canyon walls on both sides, enemy force ahead, pursuit teams certainly closing from behind. The tactical situation was catastrophically bad. 11 rounds in her pistol versus 15+ fighters, with automatic weapons and crew-served guns. "There's always a way," Sarah muttered, more to herself than the others. "There's always a way." Then she saw it, a narrow ravine cutting up the western canyon wall, barely wide enough for a person. Steep, probably unstable, but it led up and over. "There," she pointed, "we climb." "That's impossible," Amara protested. So was surviving the helicopter crash. So was evading for 2 weeks behind enemy lines. So was everything we've done. Sarah met her eyes. "We don't stop now." They began climbing just as shouts erupted below. The militia had spotted their position. Gunfire cracked, bullets sparking off rocks. Sarah pushed Dylan ahead, shielding him with her body. "Climb, don't look back." A round hit the rock beside her head, stone fragments cutting her cheek. Sarah returned fire, 2 quick shots that sent the fighters scrambling for cover. 9 rounds left. Amara screamed as a bullet grazed her shoulder, but she kept climbing, driven by maternal instinct to protect her son. They were halfway up when the heavy machine gun opened fire. The .50 caliber rounds tore through the ravine, turning rock into shrapnel. One caught Amara in the leg, spinning her around. She started to fall. Sarah lunged, catching her with her injured arm. The pain was blinding, something tearing in her shoulder, but she held on, hauling Amara upward. "I've got you, keep moving." Below, Hassan himself appeared, directing fire, orchestrating the assault. Sarah could see his face, the cold satisfaction of a predator closing in for the kill. She fired 3 more rounds, forcing him to cover. 6 left. They crested the ravine's top, tumbling over onto a plateau. But there was no safety. Militia trucks were already racing around the canyon, cutting off escape routes. Sarah pulled Amara and Dylan behind a cluster of boulders. Amara's leg was bleeding badly. Dylan was crying, his child's mind finally overwhelmed by the violence. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, checking her remaining ammunition. 6 rounds. "I'm so sorry I got you into this." "You gave us hope," Amara gasped through the pain. "For 2 weeks you gave us hope, whatever happens now." The distinctive whump-whump-whump of helicopter rotors cut through her words. Hassan's reinforcement, they were finished. Sarah stood, pistol ready, prepared to make her final stand. She'd go down fighting. At least she could do that much. But the sound was wrong. American helicopters had a different signature, a different rhythm that every operator knew instinctively. 4 black shapes crested the ridge, flying NOE, nap of the earth, skimming barely 50 feet above the ground. MH-60 Black Hawks, American birds, and they were coming in hot. "Get down!" Sarah threw herself over Amara and Dylan as the lead helicopter opened fire. Miniguns screamed, putting down suppressive fire that tore the militia positions apart. The Black Hawks flared, and Sarah's heart nearly stopped as she saw figures fast dropping down, operators in full kit, moving with lethal precision. SEAL Team 7. And leading them, unmistakable even in full tactical gear, was Jake Richards. "Ghost," his voice carried over the chaos, "we got you." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as her team formed a defensive perimeter, engaging Hassan's forces with overwhelming firepower. 2 SEALs reached her position. "Ma'am, we're going home," one said, already applying a tourniquet to Amara's leg. "The civilians come too," Sarah ordered, her command voice returning. "Both of them non-negotiable." "Already approved, ma'am. Intel says they saved your life. They're coming home." The firefight was brief and brutal. Hassan's militia, caught in the open by superior forces with air support, broke and scattered. Hassan himself dove into a vehicle, fleeing rather than face American special operations. Jake reached Sarah, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "You stubborn, magnificent ghost, we thought you were dead." "Takes more than a helicopter crash to kill a Martinez," Sarah croaked, laughing and crying simultaneously. Clearly, Jake pulled back, his eyes taking in her injuries, her condition. "Jesus, Sarah, how did you?" "Later, get them on that bird." She pointed to Amara and Dylan. "They're the real heroes." The evacuation was textbook perfect. Within 4 minutes, all personnel were aboard the helicopters. Sarah held Dylan as they lifted off, the boy's face pressed against the window, watching his homeland disappear below. "Where we go?" he asked in broken English. "Somewhere safe," Sarah promised. "Somewhere you and your mother can finally rest." As the Black Hawks crossed into Turkish airspace, as friendly territory materialized below, Sarah finally let herself believe it. She'd made it, they'd all made it. The storm had tried to kill her, the desert had tried to claim her, the enemy had hunted her relentlessly, but Sarah Martinez, Ghost, had risen through it all. Jake sat beside her, shaking his head in amazement. "When we found your vest, your rifle, we were sure. The memorial service is scheduled for next week." "Guess we should cancel that," Sarah managed a weak smile. "You have no idea what's waiting for you. The news networks, the Pentagon, everyone thinks you're KIA. When you walk back into the world," Jake trailed off. Sarah looked at Amara, now sedated and stabilized by the team medic. At Dylan, sleeping against her shoulder, finally safe. At her teammates who'd refused to give up. "I didn't walk back alone," she said quietly. "Remember that, I didn't make it alone." The helicopters raced toward the rising sun, carrying 3 survivors from the storm, carrying a story that would be told for generations in the teams. The story of Ghost, who refused to stay dead. Below in the canyon, Hassan Qasem watched the American helicopters disappear, his fists clenched in impotent rage. The ghost had slipped through his fingers. But Sarah Martinez was thinking only of home, of her family who thought she was dead, of the impossible journey that was finally, mercifully over. The storm had passed, and she had risen. The fluorescent lights of Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany hurt Sarah's eyes after so many nights in darkness. She'd been in the ICU for 3 days, surgery on her arm, treatment for infection, rehydration, nutrition. The doctors said she'd lost 28 pounds. Her body was a map of scars and bruises, each one telling a story of survival. But she was alive. In the room next door, Amara was recovering from her own surgery. The bullet had shattered her femur, but the orthopedic team was optimistic. Dylan rarely left his mother's side, though he'd visited Sarah twice, bringing her drawings of helicopters and mountains. "You've got a visitor," the nurse announced, and Sarah's heart stopped as her father walked through the door. Gunnery Sergeant Eduardo Martinez, retired Marine, stood frozen in the doorway. His weathered face crumpled, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. Behind him, her mother Maria and sister Jessica crowded in, all three of them crying. "My girl," Eduardo whispered, "my baby girl." Sarah tried to speak but couldn't. Her father crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with infinite gentleness, mindful of her injuries. "They told us you were dead," he choked out. "2 weeks we thought you were dead." "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" He pulled back, gripping her shoulders. "Martinez women don't apologize for surviving. They don't apologize for coming home." Jessica practically launched herself onto the bed, sobbing into Sarah's shoulder. Maria held both her daughters, whispering prayers of gratitude in Spanish. For 20 minutes, they simply held each other, a family reunited against impossible odds. Finally, Eduardo straightened, wiping his eyes, the Marine reasserting control. "They're calling you a hero. The news, the Pentagon, everyone wants to talk to you." "I'm not a hero, Dad. The people who died in that crash, they're the heroes. Amara and Dylan, who risked everything to save me, they're the heroes." "Then tell them that," Eduardo said firmly. "Tell the world what real heroism looks like." 3 months later, Sarah stood in dress whites before the assembled crowd at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The ceremony was elaborate. Politicians, media, the entire SEAL community turned out, but Sarah barely noticed them. She was focused on 3 people in the front row: Amara, walking with a cane but walking nonetheless; Dylan, wearing a new suit that was slightly too big; and Jake, standing at attention with Team 7, pride evident on his face. The Chief of Naval Operations stepped forward with the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor. As he read the citation, Sarah's mind drifted to the others who deserved to be here. Petty Officer Marcus Chen, her spotter, killed in the crash. Chief Petty Officer Tom Anderson, who'd been teaching her a card game hours before the mission. Lieutenant Brad Cooper, who'd shown her pictures of his newborn daughter just that morning. All gone, all buried while she fought to survive. The metal felt heavy around her neck, not with pride but with responsibility. When it came time for her to speak, Sarah surprised everyone by calling Amara to the podium. "This woman," Sarah's voice rang clear across the assembled crowd, "lost her husband to terrorism, lost her home to war, had every reason to turn me in for the bounty to save herself and her son. Instead, she risked everything to save an enemy's enemy, a stranger from across the world." She turned to Amara, who stood trembling with emotion. The real courage wasn't surviving behind enemy lines. It was choosing compassion when the world demanded hatred. It was choosing to help when helping could cost you everything. Through a translator, Amara spoke softly. "My husband Rashid believed that humanity transcends borders, that we are all connected. I honored his memory by honoring his beliefs. Sarah is not a stranger. She is my sister." The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah embraced Amara, both women crying openly. Later at the reception, Sarah found herself cornered by a CNN reporter. "Lieutenant Commander, you've been offered a position as a SEER instructor. Will you accept, or are you returning to operational duty?" Sarah glanced at her team. Jake was laughing with some junior SEALs, probably telling an embellished version of the rescue. Her arms still ached, would probably always ache. The doctors said full recovery would take another 6 months. "I'm accepting the instructor position," she answered. "Every SEAL who goes through SEER training will learn what I learned out there, that survival isn't just about tactics and skills. It's about the will to keep going when everything says you should quit. It's about the bonds we forge and the people we become in the crucible." "And what about Amara and Dylan?" the reporter pressed. Sarah smiled. Asylum was granted within a week. They're living in Virginia Beach now. Amara's working as a nurse at the VA hospital. Dylan starts middle school next month. I see them every weekend. "They're family now," They always were, Sarah said simply. From the moment Amara chose to help instead of collecting that bounty. As the sun set over the Pacific, Sarah stood alone at the SEAL Memorial Wall, her fingers tracing the names of teammates who hadn't made it home. The survivor's guilt would never fully leave. She'd learned to carry it, to honor it, to let it drive her to be better. "I made it, guys," she whispered to the names. "And I'm going to make sure your sacrifice meant something. Every SEAL I train, every mission that succeeds because someone remembered what I teach them. That's your legacy too." Jake appeared beside her, offering a beer. They stood in comfortable silence, two warriors who'd seen the worst and somehow made it through. "Ready for the next chapter, Ghost?" he finally asked. Sarah took a long drink, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, the same colors as that Syrian desert where she'd almost died, where she'd found the strength she didn't know she possessed. "You know what's funny?" she said. "They called me Ghost because I moved unseen, because I was the phantom sniper they never saw coming. But now it means something different." "What's that?" "Ghosts are supposed to be dead, but they refuse to stay gone. They come back. They persist." She smiled, raising her bottle in a toast to the memorial wall, to her fallen brothers, to Amara and Dylan, to everyone who'd played a part in her impossible survival. "So yeah, I'm ready, because Ghost isn't just a call sign anymore." "What is it?" "A promise that we don't give up, that we don't leave people behind, that we rise from the storm no matter how hard it tries to keep us down." Jake clinked his bottle against hers. "Hooyah to that." "Hooyah," Sarah echoed. In the distance she could see Amara and Dylan at the beach, the boy running in the waves, laughing, a sound that had been stolen from him for so long, now reclaimed in freedom. Amara waved to Sarah, and Sarah waved back. 2 weeks ago, Dylan had asked her a question. "Miss Sarah, why you save us? We were nobody to you." Sarah had knelt to his level, looking into eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "Because that's what family does, and you're my family now." The Navy had declared her KIA, but she'd proven them wrong. The enemy had hunted her, but she'd evaded. The odds had been impossible, but she'd survived. Lieutenant Commander Sarah "Ghost" Martinez wasn't just a SEAL anymore. She was a symbol of resilience, of the unbreakable human spirit, of the bonds that transcend nationality and circumstance. She was the ghost who refused to stay dead. And as she walked away from the memorial toward her team, toward Amara and Dylan, toward whatever came next, Sarah Martinez smiled. The storm had tested her, broken her, remade her. But it hadn't defeated her. Nothing ever would. The end.